Nearly 40% of girls who weren't playing sport said that if they could wear their preferred uniform, that would encourage them to start playing sport. So preferred uniform is key. But what's preferred uniform? What my preferred uniform is may be different to yours or yours, Chloe.
Hey, I'm Chloe Dalton with KO Sports. In today's episode of Everyone's Game, we're talking about the issues surrounding women's kit, from oversized hand-me-downs to anxiety around white shorts during menstruation and the sexualisation of female athletes across all levels of the game. To further this discussion, I'm joined by Australian women's cricketer Ellyse Perry, ICC Player of the Decade. We're also joined by Professor Clare Hanlon from Victoria University, an advisor across women in sport. Ellyse, we might start with you. If you reflect on your career when you were younger, was there a moment you started to notice that there was something not right about your kit or your equipment?
Probably one of the first instances of that experience was playing cricket and a men's box, which is obviously cupped and shaped very differently, and probably not finding out till a couple of years down the track that there was actually a female shaped protection as well, but it was so much harder to come across. There certainly wasn't one in the kit either, the team kit, to just be able to use. So I think you that's a signal pretty early on that there's probably not the same thought in mind for female participants of the sport when that kind of protection isn't readily available.
Is that something you felt during your career and have felt so far in your career, that anxiety with wearing the white uniform? We know cricket whites are a big part of the game.
Look, I think probably on a personal level, to be honest, it's not something that has caused me too much anxiety, and I think that's probably a bit of a personal interaction with, I suppose, wearing those clothes and where that fit around my development as a female and how I felt about those things. But I think certainly I've very much shared a dressing room and had teammates that do feel that kind of anxiety because they have a different experience with their period or how that sort of plays out for them in any given month. So there is definitely an element of anxiety around particularly wearing white clothing, but I think any clothing, to be honest, it's a little bit of a daunting time for everyone at that time of the month, and especially when you're young and navigating that and then being active and moving and playing sport in front of a lot of people, you do become more aware of it.
Absolutely, and body dissatisfaction for girls, particularly adolescent girls, tends to be prominent, and based on that impacts them playing sport. They fear embarrassment, being judged by other people. So sport uniforms have a large role to play.
Yeah, to that point, sorry Claire, do you think that there's more responsibility that needs to be put on the sporting bodies themselves to allow athletes to have more freedom of choice?
I think it's sports and brands are looking at it from a broader perspective. It's a community approach that needs to happen because Ellyse said earlier in the context where it's that care factor. If athletes feel that their needs have been catered for, that helps with confidence. I mean, you two are prime examples. You've both played in 5 different national team sports. If we think about it in the context of basketball, rugby, AFLW, football and cricket. Now there's 5. I'm seriously the odd one out here. But in the context of what you've experienced in team sports, you've got a hell of a lot of experience here in relation to uniforms and what you've experienced as a team and your team members. And I think that has a lot to do as well in the context, does it affect your performance and how do you feel?
Well, I think a key thing that you mentioned there, Claire, is brands. And I think typically in the past, if manufacturers don't see a commercial value in producing, developing and then selling a female-specific line of equipment or sporting apparel, even if organisations or athletes are aware of their needs, it's very hard to have them met unless there is a product there available. And that is certainly a growing space and one that's got a lot more opportunity to evolve in the future. But there's just not been the impetus from brands or manufacturers to actually produce these kinds of apparel or equipment either.
It was interesting, the Matilda's example off the back of the World Cup around the goalkeepers' jerseys, the huge demand that there was for the goalkeepers' jerseys off Mackenzie Arnold, the brick walls, incredible performance. That's a pretty good example of there being a huge demand, not necessarily from a performance perspective, but people wanting to buy women's apparel that fits and is in the names of the athletes that they want to see more of.
Absolutely, visibility is key. And to have outfits that you can celebrate the position of where players are playing and in the context of what they're doing and their skill set and the name on the back of the jersey, I mean, that in itself is something where we need to celebrate and have more of.
If we look at the Wimbledon example, Ellyse, we know that Wimbledon's a very traditional tournament, has always been all white. We saw a change where they allowed players to wear different coloured undergarments under the white, the female players, to allow them to be a little bit more comfortable. Do you think that's doing enough?
Oh yeah, it's a really tough question. I think I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to these kinds of issues, and it's probably more building out the flexibility and scope to allow people to feel comfortable when they go on the court, and that's going to look different for most athletes.
I think you've nailed it. Talking about not one style fits all, and talking about the importance of choice and to enable choice. So if we go back to Wimbledon, we now have a choice. Women have a choice as to whether they wear coloured undershorts, and that being the case, it may not be because of their period, it may be because they feel comfortable just wearing coloured undershorts, and that's okay. It's a start. More needs to happen, but it's a start. So I think it's important when we go back though to choice, research that I conducted with Puma, and it was a global research. It reinforced the research we've conducted in Australia, and that is in relation, in this case, to girls, that 70% of girls who played sport said that if they could wear their preferred uniform, albeit have a choice, they would continue playing the sport. But what's preferred uniform? What my preferred uniform is may be different to yours or yours, Chloe. So it may be short-sleeved, long-sleeved, sleeveless tops. Can we have that in a team?
And I think fundamentally that's the most important level of sport is in fact our community and club level, where you have the most numbers of participation, and you know there is so much benefit and health kind of payoffs to being active, being involved in a community, playing team sport, playing a sport that you enjoy, just getting out there. And if we're discouraging 50% of the population or a percentage of 50% of the population to not be participating in that because of some kind of consideration on what they're wearing, it just seems a little bit crazy, really.
Absolutely. This isn't rocket science. This is something that should have been done ages ago, but the more we bring it to the forefront, the more that activation is happening from a player's perspective or from a sport or a brand perspective. Hopefully, this will be a quick fix.
Can we look at the Netball Australia example? They've done an incredible job of creating more inclusive uniforms.
They have, and good on Netball Australia. The reason why they instigated it was not only because of the research we conducted in Australia, but also because they listened to their players and they listened to what their members wanted, their voice, and that was really important. And based on that, they have now created an inclusive kit. And that may be, for example, women and girls may want to wear the skirt, the shorts, 3/4 length, full length shorts when they're playing netball. They also have the option of collars or round necks or V-necks. It's whatever they feel comfortable in playing with in order for them to feel that there's a care factor. And I think that's really important. And that's for men and women too.
So the research is showing it. The players are saying that they want choice. What are some of the pushbacks that you get when you try and inform clubs and organisations that these are the things that could make sport more inclusive?
It's interesting. It's like many other things. People put up barriers for the sake of barriers. I think if you overlooked that, you could see actually this can happen. And to have organisations, Netball Australia is a prime example, but we've also had Gymnastics Australia, Swimming Australia, AFLW. They've changed from either white shorts to coloured shorts, or they've allowed choice. And for that to happen, for other sports to see that, I think that's the tipping point, because they're saying, well, if they are doing that, we should be doing that.
And if we look at it at a grassroots level, we know a lot of clubs are potentially low on funding a lot of the time, and the cost of having multiple different uniforms might be a barrier. Is there an easy fix? Is there a solution for something like that?
You raise a really good point. How many different kits do community clubs, let alone elite sports, need each year in the context of, yes, it's important for sponsors to be recognised. Uniforms are expensive. How can we embed it so it's something that people can embrace, but not only you wear on the field, but have it so they feel comfortable and they might wear it down the street as well? Wouldn't that be great for the sport?
And sustainable too. Ellyse, when you were creating this collaboration with JP Gavin Staple, what was the process like in making these products fit for you and fit for female athletes?
Yeah, it was a really enjoyable process, I think. And also a really great time to just pause and kind of reflect on some of the things that I guess, as my career has progressed or any of us playing elite sport, is that you just sort of like take certain things for granted and get on with it. So, for example, leg pads in cricket, they're probably designed in general terms for male cricketers where bowlers bowl a bit faster than they do in the female game, so then there's more padding in there for protection. Men typically have bigger legs than women, so the straps are really long to accommodate calf size. I watch a lot of girls, and I've been in the same position where I would wear those pads and put them on and you'd have overhang and they'd be really bulky and weigh more than they need to. So I think things like that where you just got on with it in the past is really nice to be able to stop and be like, actually I can refine this to really kind of touch the edges of where it needs to be for me to ultimately perform to my best. And I think also as an athlete, like having the feeling that that's been considered for you when you step onto the field. For a lot of female athletes, I think when you put kit on, you kind of get this, subconscious thought that this wasn't designed for me to play at my best. This was designed for a male to play at their best. And I think that has a big impact at some level or another.
It's interesting when there's multiple things like that almost make you feel like the sport wasn't designed for you to fit in there. What role do you think that plays if you have everything that fits your body like it should? We know how elite you are as an athlete, as a cricketer. What does that allow you to do from a performance perspective? Because you can just kind of get in the zone, right, without having to worry about things being ill-fitting, right?
Yeah, well, and I'd probably ask you the same question, Chloe. It's a funny one because I think in some senses, as female athletes, you kind of worn things as a badge of honour that, we can make do and get on with this even if it's probably suboptimal. And to some respects, that's a really nice thing because you know that ultimately you can sort of perform regardless of things needing to be perfect. But then at the same time, I think when you are really looking for like marginal gains and tiny percentages of advantage against other people or other teams in opposition, it is really nice to put something on that makes you feel like you're in the position to go out and play your absolute best. And also then just not having to spend any kind of mental energy during a game fixing up equipment that's not fitting right and having to constantly readjust it, or feeling self-conscious in a top that you're wearing or a pair of pants or shorts and always fiddling with that in a break of play and your mind being drawn back to that. Like at some level that's definitely got to have an impact on performance, so it's nice not to have that.
Sometimes when I think about my sport, I feel like as a female athlete there's a sense of pressure that comes with my appearance. It's not necessarily just about my performance as an athlete. There's a sense of physical appearance of what you do as a female athlete. Is that a pressure that you have felt throughout your career?
Not overtly, certainly not. I think, there certainly has been different junctures in time where we hold quite different standards for how we assess a female athlete and their achievements and what we value as opposed to some male athletes. And I think that is certainly changing and has evolved over the last little bit, particularly as female sport has become more and more watched, more and more scrutinised for their performances and invested in terms of, how our teams are doing from a competitive point of view. But I think, it's fair to say that in the past there's probably been examples where, female athletes draw attention, often unwanted, because of how they look as opposed to how they're performing.
And Claire, we've seen a couple of examples of uniforms and kits that the public have said look like they are trying to sexualise female athletes in a sense. What impact can that have on the elite athletes themselves, but also the athletes at community level?
if girls see elite athletes in uniforms that they don't feel comfortable with, and we've often had girls that have said this to us, I don't want to wear what they're wearing, so I'm swapping sports. And we've seen over and over again the effects of changed uniform policies. They have a big impact. We did a quick study straight after one of our findings, and where a couple of sports changed their policies, just on girls and women, just to see their response as to, well, based on the uniform change, how did you feel? And nearly 50% of girls and women said because they now could have choice, or they changed from white to coloured, 50% said that they will now continue playing that sport.
What's one practical takeaway, do you think, in this big topic of women's uniform?
I think there's an opportunity here, first of all, for girls and women to, if they're not happy, to go to their school or to go to their sport and say, here's the evidence. And we've got research, we've got guides out there to help sports and to the conversation. So here's the evidence. This reinforces how we as members feel. Let's change our uniform policies. And for sports to look at other sports and say, well, we care about our athletes. We want to empower our athletes. Let's give them the choice of the kits. Not one style fits all. And I think that's something that there's an opportunity here to embrace. And Ellyse, well done for creating what you're doing and showing in the context of amended kits that fit girls and women, because we need people like you in order to show that there is opportunity out there for women and girls to play.
I think overall, listening to this discussion and all the research that's been done, and the voices that we've heard from female athletes across the spectrum of participation is really just this strong desire for their own freedom of expression. Freedom to express femininity how they want to, freedom to express their performance in the way that they want to, and their participation, and freedom to just be in a community and wear what they want to feel comfortable. I think that's just the most important thing that seems to be coming through with all of this.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for your contributions today. I think it's been such a great conversation around a really complex issue. And thank you for everyone watching. You can leave your questions in the comments and stay tuned for the next episode of Everyone's Game.